Ideology and hegemony in the media. We're going to look at a thinker called Louis Althusser, a French philosopher who built upon the theories of Karl Marx and his philosophy. His most famous essay is Ideology and Ideological State Apparatus, Notes Towards an Investigation in Lenin and Philosophy, and other essays. And this is the essay that's really relevant to the media studies course we're looking at. Definition. This is a definition of ideology. It's a system of ideas or ideals, especially one that forms the basis of economic or political policy. It's the ideas or manners of thinking of a group, social class or individual. So it's both has a kind of narrow definition of being a kind of explicit or open set of ideas that formulate political policy, but also it has a more general definition, meaning a set of ideas that actually permeate or go through a whole way of thinking and a whole way of being for a social class. Let's look at this essay and the vital quotes in it. Althusser writes about what he calls ideological state apparatuses, ISAs as he calls them for short. And let's read what he says about them and then just work out what actually he means they are. They must not be confused with repressive state apparatus. Remember that in Marxist theory, the state apparatus, SA, contains the government, administration, the army, the police, the courts, the prisons, which constitute what I shall in future call the repressive state apparatus. Repressive suggests that the state apparatus in question functions by violence, at least ultimately, since repression, administrative repression, may take non-physical forms. So this is a Marxist idea that there are institutions in society that keep the proletariat, working class people, down by violence if necessary. So the police or the army or the law courts actually, in the end, if a working class group of people are protesting against their positions, they will actually use force to do this. I shall call ideological state apparatuses a certain number of realities which present themselves to the immediate observer in the form of distinct and specialized institutions. I propose an empirical list of these, which will obviously have to be examined in detail, tested, corrected, and reorganized. With all the reservations implied by this requirement, we can for the moment regard the following institutions as ideological state apparatus, in no particular order of significance. So you've got the religious ISA, a group of different churches, educational ISA, system of different public and private schools, you've got the family ISA, the legal, the political ISA, the trade union ISA, and then, crucially for us, the communications ISA. Remember, he's writing in 1970, but already people were beginning to realise the great power of the media to influence people. And what he means by an ideological state apparatus is that this is not trying to impose the ruling elite's ideas by force, but doing it by more subtle means, by a kind of form of brainwashing. So it's in the forms of talk and discourse that are going on that the ideological state apparatus is working. That is in contrast to the repressive state apparatus, which obviously are using force ultimately. But something like the media is never ever going to ultimately use force to impose its views. But it will use things like advertising to actually persuade people that the values of capitalism, the values of buying products in a capitalist society, the social order of a capitalist society, the kind of order of the genders, and that's is the correct one. So ideological state apparatus are there to, in Althusser's view, to persuade very subtly that the capitalist way of doing things is the right way. Althusser proposed that the media is permeated or saturated with discourses, ways of talking, writing, representing, which promote both overtly or in an open way and covertly in a hidden way the ideological state apparatus by brainwashing people into accepting the basic tenets of capitalism. His theory is very similar to hypodermic needle theory, but obviously it's a lot more developed, it's a lot more sophisticated in what he said. But the basic idea is extremely similar, that what you've got is a ruling elite in charge of society who are trying to impose their views upon people through the media, and in particular what they're very concerned to do is to persuade people that the values of capitalism, of buying things, the social order of capitalism, where you've got a ruling elite who control most of the kind of means of production, they have most of the money, they have nearly all of the power, that's the right way. So what you'll find, if Althusser is right, is constantly in the media images, stories, adverts that are persuading you that the social order that we've got at the moment is the right social order. Ideological state apparatus, whatever they are, contribute to the same result. This is Althusser writing. The reproduction of the relations of production, i.e. of capitalist relations of exploitation, so that the ISAs always promote, ultimately, the exploitation of the working classes, and that's what lurks behind them, even if it's a kind of subtle thing. Each of them contributes towards this single result in the way proper to it. The political apparatus, by subjecting individuals to the political state ideology, the indirect parliamentary or direct plebiscitary or fascist democratic ideology. And this is the crucial bit from our point of view, the cramming, the communications apparatus, by cramming every citizen with daily doses of nationalism, chauvinism, liberalism, moralism by means of the press, the radio and the television. The same goes for the cultural apparatus. The role of sport in chauvinism is of first importance. So he's saying that constantly we're going to find in the media nationalism, the promotion of countries, certain countries being the right way of living, that i.e. you're going to find in Britain lots of sort of media that are going to get you celebrating the concept of England, say, and certainly perhaps we see that in television with the football matches. There's a lot of sort of jingoism, isn't there? A lot of promotion of the concept of England being a great nation. Chauvinism, so that's supporting the idea that men are better than women, and you're going to find that a lot in the media. Liberalism, well, what he meant by that is kind of perhaps different from what we might mean. The idea that a liberal economy, the idea that there should be no sort of restraints on people like the banks and capitalists, that they should be allowed to do whatever they want to do. Moralism, so the old idea that certain ways of being, that for example no sex before marriage and those sorts of things are going to be promoted by the press, the radio and television. Okay. Linked to Althusser's ideas is the idea of hegemony, which is just, if you define that, it's the leadership or dominance by one social group. And the idea in Althusser and Gramsci's theoretical writings is that ruling class are the hegemony, or the dominant social group. They both consciously, unconsciously shape the ISAs. So they both of these thinkers really promoted the idea that there's a dominant ideology out there that's really being promoted by the ruling classes in things like the media. Gramsci was an Italian thinker who died in 1937, and he rejected capitalist thinking, and he sort of developed some of the ideas of Marx, and thought about the kind of issue of human subjectivity, the way we feel about things. And he used the term hegemony to note the predominance of one social class over another. This represents not only the political and economic control, but also the ability of the dominant class to project its own way of seeing the world, so that those who are subordinated by it, those who are crushed by it or exploited by it or put second by it, accept it as common sense and natural. Commentators stress this involves willing and active consent, and so there's more in that link there, but the basic idea is that the media will promote ways of thinking about the world, capitalist ways of thinking about the world, as pure common sense.